Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Timex Reissue. This watch is available from Amazon.ie for €96. The Timex was originally released in 1979, and then in 2019, to celebrate its 40th anniversary, Timex released this piece, the Timex Reissue. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the watch comes in a watch box, which is housed inside this outer black cardboard box. On the lid it's branded with the Timex logo, so one removes the lid, which is a snug fit to the base. And inside we have the watch box itself, which I'll take out and show you. So, plastic watch box, which is vinyl or PU leather coated, matte black grain finish to give the impression of genuine leather, but it is in fact vinyl or PU leather coated. On the lid we have the Timex logo, and it's very well finished. As you can see, every side of it is coated with vinyl or PU leather to a good standard, spring-loaded hinge lid, and the interior is upholstered to a good standard with contrasting white felt or fabric, Timex branding on the underside of the hinge lid. In the base, there is a panel with two elasticated straps which secures the watch from moving around in shipping, and there's also a ribbon pull which makes it easy to get purchase on with your index finger and thumb. You can remove this panel, as you can see, and it reveals in the base there's a cutout recess which houses the item which I'll show you. So good presentation, good quality watch box, and I like it. So with regards to items, one gets this booklet, which is the owner's instruction manual, clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English and also translated into a plethora of foreign languages, and it details the operation of the movement used, which is the Seiko Epson caliber PC33A quartz. Also details the terms and conditions of the 12-month international warranty, and it is acceptable to have a 12-month international warranty versus 2 years, bearing in mind this is a low-tier price point piece at only €96. And lastly, one also gets this Timex branded cardboard tag. On the reverse, it details the full reference number of the Timex Reissue and also the barcode and reference number. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, we have a 38mm case diameter. We have a lug-to-lug measurement of 44.6mm, a thickness of 12.5mm, and a lug width of 18mm. The FKM floor rubber strap is Tropic style, and it's flared, so it's wider than the 18mm lug width. It tapers at the lugs down to the buckle and tang. Solid 316L grade stainless steel buckle and tang, flawless mirror polishing to the top side, underside and flanks, and it is signed with Timex, and I'm pleased to see they've signed it rather than taking the production cost-cutting measure of using a sterile buckle and tang. Quality of the mirror polishing is excellent. No sharp edges, no burrs to the top edge or the corners. The undercuts to the flanks have a nice curvature and they're deburred very well, so no sharp edges whatsoever. Nice heavy gauge to the 316L grade stainless steel buckle and tang, and it does look very aesthetically pleasing. We've got two keepers, and the first keeper and second keeper both slide. They're not fixed, so we don't have teeth on the left and the right hand flanks of the Tropic style rubber strap, which is FKM floor rubber. And good attention to detail, because they've also embossed the first keeper with Q for Timex. Just bear with me, I'll get the camera to focus on it. And this is good attention to detail, rather than leaving the two keepers sterile and unsigned. Nice to see the Q emblem embossed. So, with regards to the rest of the specification, we have a double-domed acrylic crystal. So, subjectively one can be critical of this because one has to appreciate the Timex is a heritage reissue of the original 1979 version, and that's also used acrylic crystal, but some collectors would argue Timex should have upgraded it to modern day specification with a double-domed sapphire crystal with clear AR coating. Visually, that would have given the impression of a boxed top hat crystal and also the aesthetic of this double-domed acrylic crystal, but purist Timex collectors of course will appreciate this because it is true to the original 1979 version, and it does have the vintage aesthetic of a piece produced in the 1970s as a result. I like it. Visually it does remind me of the lucite crystal used in Vostok Amphibia pieces. Lucite is a type of acrylic which deforms plastically under pressure, and therefore the more pressure exerted on lucite, the more it plastically deforms and therefore provides a better hermetic seal to the case. But that's a unique design characteristic of Vostok Amphibia pieces, because the hermetic seal is not provided by a rubber O-ring gasket. The deformation of the plastic deforming lucite actually performs the hermetic seal in the absence of a rubber O-ring gasket. But this acrylic crystal visually does look like that 3mm thick Vostok Amphibia lucite domed crystal, although it does have a rubber O-ring gasket, so it doesn't rely upon it deforming. 50 metres of hermetic seal is perfectly acceptable, and one has to appreciate this is not a dive piece with 200 metres, it's not ISO rated. 50 metres does give the aesthetic of the original 1979 piece, and of course that was also 50 metres, so it's perfectly acceptable, it's not a dive piece. The Pepsi bezel again is subjective because some purist collectors like it because it has the 12 hours and of course blue and red Pepsi. It would be more useful as per GMT bezel, which is Pepsi, if they had used 24-hour marks on the bezel versus the 12, but of course again purist Timex collectors will appreciate the 12-hour markers and the Arabic numerals being 12 hours versus 24. But it really comes down to your personal taste. Do you prefer Pepsi bezels to have GMT markings, 24 hours, or do you like the 12-hour markings as per the original Timex Q produced in the 1970s? So, I like the matte blue dial. C3 Superluminova printed indices and perfect colour tone match between the handset. They don't look lighter or darker or more cream or more yellow, and I like that it's a patina tone because visually it does give the aesthetic of the 1979 Q Timex, which this is a heritage reissue of. Matte blue dial is very aesthetically pleasing and it complements the blue portion of the Pepsi bezel, which is midnight blue. I really like the colour tone. Also nice to see the red contrasting second hand because that also complements the red accent on the red portion of the Pepsi bezel. So very nice continuity of design. Blue dial complements the blue portion of the dial, red second hand complements the red portion of the bezel. So day-date complication piece, just bear with me, I'll move the minute hand out of the way so you can see it better. Now Sunday is the only day of the week which is in red. So SUN for Sunday is in red. The other days of the week are in black, and it's bilingual both in French and English, and it alternates between the two, which is good. So something I want to clarify, and I'll show you this when I test the crown execution. We have a quickset date complication, so the days of the month click over the quickset. However, the day complication does not have a quickset. That's the negative of the Seiko Epson caliber PC33A quartz. One has to cycle through the 24 hours with the hour hands in order to advance the day complication, but the date complication is a quickset. We have a solid 316L grade stainless steel bezel, and it's coin edge finished, as you can see, and the undercut is anodized blue, which does add some interest to it, and it is very thin and low profile as per the original Q Timex from 1979. Aluminium bezel insert does give the piece a vintage aesthetic, and I like this silver triangle, silver hour marks, and also the silver Arabic numerals, and it's anodized blue and anodized red to a very good standard. Now subjectively, Timex collectors might prefer this to be upgraded to a sapphire bezel insert or alternatively a ceramic bezel insert, because needless to say sapphire and ceramic are harder and more scratch resistant, but one has to appreciate this is a heritage reissue, hence the name Q Timex Reissue, and the original did use an aluminium bezel insert, so this is true to the original. I like it, I think it gives the piece a vintage aesthetic, although not as scratch resistant. Case is solid 316L grade stainless steel, tonneau case, and we've got these angular bevels on the ends of the case which are horizontally brush satin finished to a beautiful lustre. What I like about it is the tonneau case has large mirror polished bevels on the top edge, which marks the transition between the mirror polished top of the tonneau case and the mirror polished flanks. Nice crisp edge, and it also deletes the sharp edge, and it flows nicely from the tip of the angular lug to the tip of the angular lug. And I also like these bevels or facets on the ends as per the original. The case shape is very aesthetically pleasing. It really does give the piece a vintage aesthetic as per the original Q Timex from 1979. Beautiful case shape. Large undercuts to the flanks of the case, and I like that the flanks of the case are not thick and slab-sided, they're very low profile, and it is a surprisingly thin piece even though it does have a thick acrylic crystal. It's only 12.5, and that's the benefit of it only being 50 metres. It doesn't need a thicker crystal or thicker case back. So the strap is FKM floor rubber, and it's a tropic style strap, and again this does fit the aesthetic of this piece. Now strictly speaking it's not a dive watch, it's a dive style watch with a 12-hour Pepsi bezel, but nonetheless tropic straps were used in the 1960s and the 1970s, and this is a faithful, one could say, replica of it. It's not a genuine tropic strap, it's made by Timex, but nonetheless it does have the iconic pattern of vintage tropic straps which were produced in the 1960s and 1970s. So fully perforated, textured on the top side, and it has the grid formation on the underside, which I'll show you. The benefit of the perforations is twofold. First benefit of the perforations is it's not just aesthetically pleasing, it actually serves a meaningful purpose because it allows for sweat and perspiration to wick away from the wrist, but also for seawater to wick away from the strap. So if you used a dive watch, for example, in seawater, it helped the tropic strap to dry out quickly because the water could wick away through the full perforations. The other benefit is it makes the strap very soft and supple because it's very flexible with all the perforations, and of course it allows for air circulation. So yes, it is aesthetically pleasing, but yes, it is also beneficial to have these perforations, and of course plenty of holes in it. This will fit from a 6 to an 8-inch wrist size, so huge variation due to all the holes in the centre. The underside is textured, as you can see. They've done a good job of the moulding. It perfectly replicates the vintage Tropic straps from the 1970s. Also good attention to detail that they've signed it when they've moulded it with Q Timex. And this is good. It's not just a sterile strap with a signed buckle and tang. They've also signed Q Timex on both sides. And very nice to see that. So good attention to detail. What I like about it is, although it's textured in the moulding, it has the iconic grid formation of the Tropic straps in the 1970s. It's actually very smooth, and it feels very smooth and comfortable to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. And it's textured on the top side and the underside, but the flanks are perfectly smooth. What I like about it is there is a slight taper, just bear with me, I'll get the camera to focus. So at the spring bar end it's thicker where it needs to be more reinforced and robust, and then it gradually tapers down in thickness down to the buckle and tang end where it needs to be more soft and supple. This is very good. They've got the proportions of it excellent. The taper is correct, and also I like that it's not just an 18mm strap, because that would look too slender for the 38mm case. It's flared, so the strap is wider at the spring bar end, as you can see, and it tapers down gradually to the buckle and tang. Nice proportions. The colour tone is excellent. I like the navy blue tone because it matches the anodised undercut to the bezel, and also the midnight blue portion of the Pepsi bezel, as well as the matte blue navy blue dial. So the navy blue is good, continuity of design. Pepsi bezel has midnight blue, dial is navy blue, strap is navy blue, and anodised undercut to the bezel is also blue. So we've got those blue accents throughout the piece. In terms of how soft and supple it is, I've referred to this in my previous reviews, but I will reiterate it for the benefit of those viewers that have not heard that. FKM floor rubber really is a compromise between natural rubber and nitrile butadiene rubber at the top end of the spectrum in straps, and silicone rubber at the other end of the spectrum. So natural rubber and NBR, nitrile butadiene rubber, is stiff and it is therefore not as comfortable. That's the negative, but it is more durable and robust. That's the positive. Silicone rubber at the other end of the spectrum is more soft and supple. That's the benefit. The negative is it's not as durable and robust. So has a tendency to split and crack, but it is very comfortable. Doesn't require any breaking in. Between the two ends of the spectrum, one has this, which is FKM floor rubber. FKM floor rubber is more soft and supple than natural rubber or NBR nitrile butadiene rubber, but it's harder and more stiff than silicone rubber. However, it's more robust than silicone rubber and more durable long term with daily wear and tear. So really it's the perfect balance between NBR, nitrile butadiene rubber, and silicone rubber at both ends of the spectrum. I like it. So it's soft and supple, particularly when it's fully perforated like this. So it does feel like a silicone rubber strap due to how flexible it is due to the perforations. It's definitely more soft and supple than a natural rubber or NBR nitrile butadiene rubber. NBR nitrile butadiene rubber is often used in the aeronautical and automotive industries because it is ultraviolet light, chemical and acid resistant, and it's particularly suitable in hostile environments for rubber O-ring gaskets and seals in the aforementioned industries. It's also particularly suitable for watch straps due to the aforementioned properties. But I personally prefer FKM floor rubber because it's more soft and supple but still more durable than silicone. It really is the perfect compromise, very aesthetically pleasing, and this is a high quality FKM floor rubber strap. So let's test the push-pull crown execution. Push-pull crown rather than screw-down crown, which is an acceptable production cost-cutting measure. Now subjectively one could say, well, Timex should have updated it to modern day specification. However, one has to be mindful of the fact the original Q Timex from 1979 did also have a push-pull crown. It did not have a screw-down crown. This is a dive style piece. It's not a credible dive watch with 200 meters. It's not ISO rated. If it did have a screw-down crown with 100 or 200 meters, of course that would be better specification. Yes, I would like to see Timex update it to that, because really a screw-down crown doesn't massively increase production costs per piece. It doesn't massively diminish profit margin per piece for Timex due to the massive volumes they're producing these in. So I would like to see this upgraded to 100 metres or 200 metres and a screw down crown, but it's push-pull crown as per the original. Solid 316L grade stainless steel crown, coin edge finished, large chamfer which deletes the tips of the coin edge teeth. Now mirror polished domes cap, it is sterile, it's unsigned, but I'm not going to be critical of it. It would be difficult to engrave or emboss Timex due to the small diameter of the crown, and the original did not have any signature on it, so I think it's acceptable to have it sterile as per the original. Push-pull crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 50 metres, which is okay for a daily wear piece. 100 or 200 would be better. I would prefer a screw-down crown. So, pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication. So if you look at the day date complication, if you look at the date, you can see it clicks over with a quick set. So it feels lighter than an NH35A. Feels more like a 2115 in terms of the clicking action used in the Casio Joro, which you may be familiar with, and it does feel very light. So it doesn't have very loud audible clicks as per an NH35A, feels more like a 2115, but it is positive. You can feel the clicks of each day of the month clicking over with a nice positive click, so I like that, and it does feel good. What I like about it is it's framed in white, the day date complication, and the date complication has black aberrant numerals which contrast very well with the white date wheel, and the alignment is correct. The single and double aberrant numerals aren't too far to the left or the right of the framing, and they're not too high or too low, and the font is high definition and crisp. It's not too thick and blurry, and it is the correct size and proportion for the aperture in the day date window, so it's good. They've done a good job of it. The alignment is bang on the centre, and also it's clearly legible. So now it's got a quick set date, but as I've mentioned, it does not have a quick set day complication. That's the negative of the Seiko Epson caliber PC33A quartz. So, in order to set the day complication, you have to pull out the crown to the second click position, which hacks the movement. We're now in the time setting position, but in order to get the Sunday to move on to Monday, you have to cycle through the 24 hours. And as you can see, it's bilingual, both in French and also English. So we're now on Monday. Now, for example, usually with a day-date complication movement, you can simply quick set the date and quick set the month by rotating the crown clockwise and anti-clockwise. So, for example, I'm now in the date setting position. Rotating the crown clockwise advances it with a quick set. That's beneficial. Normally, what would happen is when I rotate it anti-clockwise, that would advance the day complication, but in this case it doesn't. It just makes the date complication flick, but doesn't move. So, you can only advance the date complication with a quick set clockwise, and you can't move back a day of the month. And the other thing is the day complication cannot be advanced using the date quick set. So you rotate the crown clockwise, it advances the dates, but rotating the crown anti-clockwise has negligible effect. It just makes it flick. That's the negative, and it's just a characteristic of this caliber. It doesn't have a quick set day complication. So you need to cycle through the 12 hours, and every time the hour hand passes the 12 o'clock index, when you cycle through 24 hours, it advances to the next day of the week. So Monday advances to first French, and then it will advance to Tuesday in English, as you can see. The other negative is, of course, when you advance 24 hours of the day of the week, you then advance the date. So the way to set it is you set the day complication first by cycling through the 24 hours. Then you set the date complication because, of course, that can be cycled through the 31 days of the month with a quick set, which is quicker, it's less laborious and time consuming. It's just a characteristic of the PC33A you have to become accustomed to, cycling through the 12 hours. Now, it doesn't take a lot of time, so it's not really detrimental, but I personally prefer day-date complications, which have a quick set day and quick set date complication respectively. For example, the 4R36 or NH36A, which is the same thing, they have quick set date and day complications. So you can cycle through the 7 days of the week and the 31 days of the month quickly, which is good. Works very well. The alignment of the three letters, for example, THU for Thursday, is correct. They're not too far to the left or the right, not too high or too low, bang on the centre, which is good. And you do get used to cycling through the 12 hours and also the bilingual day complication, both in English and French. So it does take some getting used to if you're used to quick set day-date complications. But alignment is good, proportions are good. Now, with regards to backplay, we're now in the time setting position, so therefore it's possible to set the time precisely to the second. It's a very light movement, so much less sensation, much less friction than an NH35A. It feels more like a 2115 quartz used in the Casio Duro. That's the feeling of it, and I dislike it. I think it's too light because, and I'll show you the reason why. Just bear with me, I'll cycle through the day dates to align it before I do that. Right, Saturday 16th. When you push back in the crown, look closely at the pencil minute hand. Now that time it remains static, but what I found is it's trial and error because sometimes it jumps out of position. So we're now at 10 past 10, but when I push it back in, it's jumped out of position, it's moved slightly backwards. And I'm going to do it a couple more times just to show you what the problem is. There is some back play in the gearing, and when you push back in the crown, when the winding stem enters the movement, it can cause the pencil minute hand to jump out of position, either clockwise or anti-clockwise. So you can see it's now jumped backwards very slightly, anti-clockwise. That time it's remained static. So you need to do it a couple of times sometimes. Now, sometimes it does happen, sometimes it doesn't. So I'll just try it again. We're now at 5 past. When I push it back in, it's remained static. But what I found is sometimes when you push the crown back in, it has a tendency to move out of position. There it moved slightly anti-clockwise. So although it is possible to set the time precisely to the second because it does have hacking, you need to take up the slack in the gearing. So for example, when you're setting the time, you need to rotate it clockwise to where you want the minute hand and then stop it and then push it in. And that takes up the back play in the gearing. There is more back play in the gearing of the PC33A than mechanical movements such as automatics like the Seiko NH35A, for example, which you're all familiar with. It's just a characteristic of quartz movements. The same applies to the 2115, which is used in the Casio Duro. That also has a light feeling to it. I personally prefer a heavier feeling to quartz calibers. The VH31, for example, to put it into perspective, doesn't have this issue. The resistance of the hour and minute hand on the Canon pinion, when you rotate it, it feels heavier. There's more friction, there's more resistance to a Seiko VH31, which is beneficial because when you're setting the time, the pencil minute hand doesn't jump out of position, and when you rotate the crown, it has that firm resistance to it. It's medium firm, which is just right. The VH31 is better. So, for example, when you push back in the crown, the minute hand remains static. In that case, it jumped forwards clockwise. So that's the problem. I've just demonstrated. It should be bang on 10 past 10, but it's not. It's actually moved. And that's the negative of the PC33A. It's just not as refined as the VH31. But of course does have day-date complication, and of course they can't use the VH31 because it lacks a day-date complication. It's not a credible alternative. So that's the negative I want you to be mindful of. Right, so let's look at the case back in detail. So we have a screwed down case back with 4 flathead screws versus a screw down case back, and I'll explain what I mean by the difference between a screw down and screwed down case back. Screwed down case back means the solid stainless steel case back has an external thread, and that interfaces or mates with the internal thread of the threading inside the head of the piece, the case. This is a screwed down case back, so we have 4 flathead screws and they screw down the case back. Now this is a credible alternative to using a pressed on case back because of course the hermetic seal is better. Screwing down the case back with 4 flathead screws gives a better hermetic seal than just simply pressing the case back on. But in both cases they could provide 50 meters, but the benefit of this is you can easily remove the case back by undoing the 4 screws. Removing a pressed on case back is more difficult. Again, I'd like to see this updated to a screw down case back because of course that would provide 100 or 200 meters of hermetic seal, which could upgrade the specification. Also the screw down crown would be beneficial, but what I like about it is it has a battery hatch and it's got this recess or scallop, and you simply can use a coin to unscrew it, and this is particularly beneficial. This is what I like about this piece. It's practical. You don't need any specialist tools. You don't need a case back removal tool, for example, or a rubber ball. You can simply use a coin engaged in this scallop or the recess to unscrew the hatch, and you can withdraw the battery and replace it without having to remove the case back itself. So this makes changing the battery every 3 years very quick and easy, and it's a job that amateur collectors can do. You don't need to have experience of watch modding or removing and replacing movements or batteries via the case back method. You can simply unscrew the hatch. So this is very good. And what I like about this is particularly useful for children, for example. It's a small piece at 38mm, and clearly it's intended for adults, But also I think this would be an ideal first watch for a child or a teenager because they particularly enjoy the aesthetics of it. It's dive style, of course vintage aesthetic, Pepsi bezel. It's a great looking piece, day-date complication, has the practicality of quartz. They don't need to manually wind it or wear it for 8 to 12 hours per day. But when it comes to changing the battery, for example, this would be an excellent first watch for a 12-year-old because they could simply unscrew it with a coin themselves and change the battery themselves, which would be very satisfying and also a learning process. So I like to see this. It's a characteristic I like about Timex watches like this Q Timex Reissue, having the battery hatch as per the original. Very simple because you rotate it anti-clockwise to unlock it and you rotate it clockwise to seal it and reinstate the 50 metres of hermetic seal. Concentric CNC lathe tool machined both on the battery hatch and also the main case back itself, and it's also engraved with curved engraving, and it says assembled in China. And I want to give due credit to Timex here because they're not trying to hide the origin of where this watch is manufactured. They've said assembled in China, which is true, all stainless steel, which is true, water resistant 50 metres, and also has the serial number of the piece, so it's excellent. They've been honest about the origin. Now in terms of the finishing, concentric CNC lathe tool machining is excellent, beautiful lustre to it, nice domed profile to it. The battery hatch does project slightly proud of the main case back, but that's acceptable because it doesn't add significant thickness. This piece is still only 12.5. Now to clarify, I measure every single piece I review with my digital caliper vernier, and when I measured this one, I measured it from the top of this acrylic crystal. It's force of habit. I've reviewed so many pieces with sapphire crystals, over 500 watches. It becomes force of habit to say double domed sapphire crystal, for example, with AR coating. Excuse me. This one has acrylic crystal, to clarify. So I've measured it from the top of the acrylic crystal to the top of the battery hatch because, of course, you can see the battery hatch does stick 1mm proud of the main case back. So the actual thickness from battery hatch to top of the crystal is 12.5, which is excellent. So it doesn't add significant thickness. In terms of comfort level, it doesn't diminish it because you can feel the battery hatch against the wrist, but the case back does feel nice and flat. Therefore, it doesn't really diminish comfort level and feel good factor. The 4 flathead screws are recessed into the holes, so no sharp edges around the holes, and the screw heads are not proud, so therefore they don't rub against the wrist. Underside of the solid stainless steel tonneau case is mirror polished on the underside to flawless standard, and there are 4 bevels which delete the sharp corners or tips of the lugs, so it's very comfortable. The mirror polished bevels on the undercuts of the flanks delete the sharp edge on the transitions and therefore maximise comfort level and feel good factor. There's no sharp edges scratching the wrist. So, comfortable piece to wear. What I like about it is, because it's only 50 metres versus 100 metres or 200, it's very thin. 12.5 is good, bearing in mind it does have a thick double-domed acrylic crystal, as you can see. So, I'll give you a wrist shot, and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, pleasant surprise with this FKM floor rubber strap, which is Tropic Style, because often you'll know from my previous reviews, rubber straps are often a fraction too short. I'll actually loosen it a bit. This one is long enough for my 8-inch wrist, which is a pleasant surprise. I can engage easily the end of the strap in both of the sliding keepers, which is good. Often straps are a fraction too short because they're made to fit the majority of collectors with a 6 to 7.5 inch wrist. This fits from a 6 minimum up to a maximum 8. Huge variation. And I can still slide an index finger beneath a buckle and tang and strap at all times, which is the correct sizing method to allow for wrist expansion in warmer weather or when one is active. So, excellent. Even sized correctly, which is loose. Plenty of length. 6 to 7.5 inches. Fantastic. Now, what I like about this piece, 2 things. One is the lack of thickness. 12.5 is excellent. Bearing in mind it does have a thick double-domed acrylic crystal as per the original, so it has the vintage aesthetic, but it's not too thick and top-heavy. It's not 13 plus, which is excellent. So, low profile, that's one thing. Comfort level and feel good factor have therefore been enhanced. Second thing I really like about it, above all else, it's only 64 grams. It's a very lightweight piece. That's the benefit of it being quartz powered and also 38mm on this FKM floor rubber strap. It's a very lightweight piece. So this is the benefit of it not being mechanical powered, for example, by the 4R36 or the NH36A, which is the same thing. That has a day-date complication, and of course that would be a credible alternative to using the Seiko Epson caliber PC33A quartz. But the original was quartz, and of course this is quartz, so it does fit being a heritage reissue of it. What I like about it is how lightweight it is, 64 grams, so it feels weightless on wrist. That's the point I'm making. Very comfortable piece to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. Needless to say, at 38mm, it doesn't really have wrist presence. I would say for collectors with a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches, it may not have enough wrist presence to satisfy. For example, if this were a 39 or 40, of course, it would be a better fit in terms of wrist presence for a larger wrist. But subjectively, one cannot be critical of that because this is true to the original 1979 Q Timex. That was also a 38mm. It has the exact same tonneau case. So proportions are true to the original. Of course, that will fully appeal to purist Q Timex collectors, and I like it. I think although it's 38, which in modern day standards, it does seem small for a contemporary piece. For a heritage reissue, it's true to the original, and I think Timex have made the correct decision. It is difficult. When a brand does a heritage reissue of a 1970s or 1960s piece, they have to strike the balance between contemporary modern day specification and vintage aesthetic. And of course, they could upgrade this to a double dome sapphire crystal with AR coating. They could upgrade the bezel insert to ceramic or sapphire, which are modern day specification. Screw down crown versus push pull crown, screw down case back versus screwed down case back, and 200 meters, for example, versus 50. So these are the difficult decisions a brand has to make. The balance between vintage aesthetic and also the balance between modern day specification. But I think with this, Timex have made a correct decision because it does look visually true to the original. And of course, aluminium bezel insert looks vintage, acrylic crystal looks vintage, and it has the identical case proportions, 38 diameter, and it's 44.6 lug to lug. Now, 44.6 lug to lug is short, it is compact. And again, for a larger 7 to 8 inch wrist, you may find it slightly too short. It does look like a small case in terms of contemporary standards. However, for a smaller 6 to 7 inch wrist, it will fit you to perfection. The benefit of the case being small, both in terms of length and also diameter, it does reduce the meat of the case. And this is only 64 grams as a result. Now, I want to clarify something. Originally in 2019, when Timex released the Q Timex Reissue, it came on a stainless steel bracelet which had folded links. Now, this FKM floor rubber strap, which is Tropic style, is definitely better. It's beneficial because the original 2019 Heritage Reissue of it, this folded link bracelet it came on, visually it did look true to the original, so aesthetically it was pleasing. The problem was it pulled arm hairs, and so therefore that diminished the comfort level and feel good factor. It was a good looking bracelet for purist Q Timex collectors, of course true to the original, but the problem was it wasn't comfortable. It pulled arm hairs. When it floated up and down the wrist, it didn't feel particularly comfortable because it kept pulling arm hairs. So that's the negative of the bracelet version. My advice to you is, regardless of wrist size, opt for this version, the FKM floor rubber strap version in the Tropic style. Tropic style is vintage looking, like 1970, so it does fit the aesthetic. Blue colour tone matches the dial plus the Pepsi bezel, which is good, and the anodised undercut to the bezel. But comfort level is better. That's the point I'm making, because this does not pull arm hairs as per the bracelet. Bracelet looks good, but just doesn't feel good. That's the truth of it. So, compact case. Doesn't really have wrist presence as per 39 or 40 on a large wrist, but does have enough wrist presence to satisfy if you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist. That's the point of making. 64 grams, feels invisible on wrist. Doesn't feel tall, doesn't feel top heavy. Visually looks very aesthetically pleasing. I love the anodised midnight blue portion and red portion of the Pepsi bezel and the silver Arabic numerals and triangle. It just looks fantastic. It's a great looking piece. I think feel good factor and comfort level of this are 10 out of 10. And also, the 12.5 thickness means it's easily going to slip underneath the shirt cuff. You'll know this from my previous reviews. 13mm and below is the sweet spot for a piece to easily slip underneath the shirt cuff. This is 12.5, therefore 0.5mm below the sweet spot. Even though it has this large domed acrylic crystal, which does add thickness, it's easily going to slip underneath the shirt cuff. So it's a practical daily wear piece. Excellent. I really like it. I think they've done a good job. They've got the balance correct between vintage aesthetic, as per the original 1979 version, and modern day specification. The FKM floor rubber strap, of course, is modern. It's not made from natural rubber, as per vintage Tropic straps. FKM floor rubber is better, as I've explained. But the rest of it, the aluminium bezel insert, the acrylic crystal, that's all vintage. So let's test the bezel execution. Now, 12-hour bezel. It's a Pepsi bezel. Now, of course, this would be better or more useful if it had a 24-hour GMT bezel, but as I've detailed, It's true to the original, which had a 12-hour bezel. I think it's the correct decision. Pepsi bezel doesn't serve any meaningful purpose because we're not looking at day and night as per a GMT bezel, but it just gives it a vintage aesthetic, and of course it does look aesthetically pleasing to have a Pepsi bezel, rather like a GMT piece. Bidirectional friction bezel. Now, that may come as a surprise to you. Again, this is another difficult decision because Timex could have updated this to modern day specification. For example, they could have made it into a GMT bezel and they could have had 4 holes drilled in the case with 4 springs and 4 ball bearings at 12, 9, 6 and 3. And that would give it a bidirectional clicking mechanism as per GMT Master 2, for example. Alternatively, they could have used a 120 click unidirectional dive bezel with a click spring engaging in grooves in the underside of the stainless steel bezel, and that would have given it 120 clicks. I prefer clicking bezels, whether they are GMT bidirectional bezels or alternatively dive watch bezels with 120 clicks. I prefer a bezel to click versus friction, but however, again, one has to be magnanimous and consider purist Q Timex collectors because, like the Vostok Amphibia from the 1960s, it predated the use of clicking bezels, 60 click and then 120 clicks, which is now the industry standard in 2025. So the original Q Timex had a friction bidirectional bezel, and this has a friction bidirectional bezel, so it is true to the original. Now, in terms of resistance, it's very firm. I like it. Usually I'd be critical of a bezel having too much resistance, but in this case I'm not going to be because it's often a characteristic with friction bezels when they're bidirectional. The friction is provided by an octagonal wire, and the octagonal wires are either made from stainless steel or alternatively copper, and they engage in a groove in their case, and then they also engage in a second groove inside the bezel, and the flats or the corners of the octagon on the wire, they engage with the grooves, and that provides the friction rather than just being a round wire, of course, which wouldn't provide enough friction. So the angular profile of the octagonal wire provides the friction that you're feeling. Now, this is very heavy in terms of friction, but I like it. The reason why I like it is when you knock against the edge of the bezel, rub against the teeth, it's not going to accidentally knock out of position. So once you set the position, for example, if you set the hour hand to 2 for 2 o'clock, when you rub against the bezel accidentally, it's not going to knock out of position. It remains static as it should do, as per a clicking bezel. So it's good. Nice firm resistance. In terms of resistance, it does feel similar to a Vostok Amphibia, which uses the same octagonal wire method to provide the friction. And I like it. I like that firm resistance. Now, in terms of smoothness, it doesn't feel rough or gritty. It doesn't feel too stiff. So, for example, in terms of resistance, it's not as stiff and heavy as a Steinhardt Ocean 139, which is too stiff. I like it. It feels very well balanced. Medium resistance. Not too heavy, not too light, but is firm. Feels even all the way through the 360 degrees of rotation. Doesn't get heavier or lighter, so it's good. And that's in both directions, both clockwise and anti-clockwise. It has the same amount of friction. When you turn it clockwise and anti-clockwise, it doesn't get heavier or looser. Feels exactly the same, which is good. They've done a very good job of it. Sometimes it's the case with the octagonal wire. For example, with a Vostok Amphibia, the ends of the octagonal wire can actually catch the grooves, either the groove in the case or the groove in the bezel. And what happens then is you get different amounts of friction. So when you rotate it clockwise, one end of the octagonal wire provides more friction and the other end doesn't. So sometimes it doesn't feel the same with bidirectional friction bezels clockwise and anti-clockwise, but Timex have got it correct. This one does, so I like it. And it feels as good as the very best Vostok Amphibia bidirectional friction bezels I've experienced, and I've owned and reviewed a plethora of Vostok Amphibias, so I'm very familiar with this method. Now, no lateral side-to-side play, feels nice and tight, that's good. Now, of course, bidirectional, so we don't need to check for alignments because you can manually line the triangle bang on the centre of the 12 o'clock index and there's 60 tick on the chapter ring, so it's good. Medium resistance, feels firm. No lateral side-to-side play, feels even all the way through the 360 degrees, clockwise and anti-clockwise, so it's a very well-refined bidirectional friction bezel. Right, so let's do a Lume test and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So patina Lume, which is good, gives the piece a vintage aesthetic, rather like tritium used on the original 1979 Q Timex. And in daylight, there's a perfect colour tone match. The same yellow patina tone to the C3 on the handset and the dial. They don't look lighter or darker, for example, more yellow or more cream. They're both identical. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed. But however, we're looking at a different number of layers here, because clearly on the hands you can see the potency of the exciter is brighter. So we're looking at 5 to 6 layers of C3 superluminova on the handset, but I think we're looking at less layers on the dial, on the printed indices, 3 to 4. Because you can see now the camera's struggling to autofocus on the dial, but still focusing on the handset. So you can see in daylight the colour tone match is the same. They look the same yellow patina tone, so that's good. In the dark, initially, the green C3 has the same green tone, so it doesn't look lighter green or darker green on the indices or the hands initially. The potency of the exciter looks the same, but when fully charged, we're definitely looking at 5 to 6 layers on the hands versus 3 to 4 layers on the indices on the dial. You can see, initially the potency of the exciter looks similar, but you can now see exponentially with time, the hands are holding charge because the potency of the exciter is better due to the 5 to 6 layers, but on the dial it's fading quickly exponentially with time. So I think we're looking at a maximum of 3 to 4 layers on the dial versus 5 to 6 on the hands. I appreciate this is a low tier piece. It's €96. One has to be realistic and magnanimous. One has to expect some production cost cutting measure in order to maximise profit margin per piece. However, regardless of price point, it's wholly unacceptable to have 5 to 6 layers on a handset and only 3 to 4 layers on the dial. The cost of production cost to Timex, in the volumes they're making them in incredibly large batches. It's negligible to apply an additional 1 to 2 layers of C3 on the dial, the same as the 5 to 6 layers on the handset. It's negligible increase in production costs. It doesn't diminish profit margin per piece. So really, there's no excuse for them doing it. So I think it's disappointing. It's the one negative of this piece I want you to be mindful of. As you can see, initially it looks okay, but then quickly what happens is the indices on the dial begin to fade quickly. But however, the hands don't. The hands hold the charge, as one would expect with 5 to 6 layers. So there's room for improvement. Now in daylight, visually it does look aesthetically pleasing with a yellow patina tone, rather like tritium lume, which has developed a patina since the 1970s. So it does fit the aesthetic of the original from 1979. It looks like tritium lume, which in 2025 has developed a patina or patinated. But you can see now, camera struggles to autofocus on it. And it's a real shame because they could easily have applied 5 to 6 layers on the dial to match the 5 to 6 on the hands, and if it looked like this, it would be very aesthetically pleasing, rather like tritium used in 1979. But you can see the problem. It just fades very quickly. So disappointing. That's the one main negative I want you to be mindful of. Right, so let's discuss the movement use because it's my favourite aspect of the piece. So this is powered by the Seiko Epson caliber PC33A quartz, which is made in Japan. Has 0 joules, has hacking, which is good. Has a day-date complication, which is useful and works correctly, but as I've shown you and explained, we have a quick set date complication, which is beneficial. However, the negative is we do not have a quick set day complication. So one can cycle through the 31 days of the month quickly using the quick set, that's good. But one cannot do the same with a day complication cycling through the 7 days of the week. You have to cycle through the 24 hours, and every time the hour hand passes the 12 o'clock index, it advances to the next day of the week. And it's bilingual, both in French and English. So it's laborious and time consuming. A quick set would be better. However, one has to be magnanimous because this is €96. We're looking at a low tier piece and one has to expect some production cost cutting measure in specification. PC33A is the correct choice for a day-date complication quartz because it is reliable, it's a well-proven workhorse quartz, and of course does support the day-date complication needed for this piece. So, quick set date, no quick set day. 3-year battery life is beneficial, so potentially you could purchase this piece and wear it every day for 3 years before needing to change the battery. And of course the benefit of having the battery hatch, which can be unscrewed with a coin and screwed back down with a coin, is it's easy to change the battery yourself. You don't need to take this to a watchmaker or jeweler to get the battery changed every 3 years, you can do it yourself. 3-year battery life is good for a quartz. What I like about it is the accuracy. Plus or minus 30 seconds per month. Now just think about that for a moment. That's not plus or minus 30 seconds per day or per week. plus or minus 30 seconds per month is better than plus or minus 1 second per day accuracy. And I can confirm that this one is running at 0 seconds per day. Plus or minus 0 seconds is stellar accuracy. So the PC33A is reliable, it's well proven, it's a workhorse quartz made in Japan, and of course Seiko Epson is quality. 3-year battery life is good, day-date complication is useful, hacking works well, setting the time works well, and the plus or minus 30 seconds per month is stellar accuracy. The only real negative to it, apart from the lack of a quick set day complication, is, as I've detailed, when you're setting the time, sometimes when the pencil minute hand is set, when you push the crown back in, it jumps out of position. It doesn't remain static, and that's something you have to get used to, or you just have to do it a couple of times, because if it does jump out of position, you have to reset it. But sometimes it doesn't do it, sometimes it does. It's also a characteristic of the 2115 used in the Casio Joro, and so one has to be mindful of that and then say, well, it's equal quality to a Miyota 2115 quartz used in the Casio Joro. This is a similar price point, it's €96, albeit the Casio Joro is less expensive, but the point I'm making is in terms of quality grade, I regard this Seiko Epson PC33A to be equal to the Miyota 2115, which would have been the alternative. The only problem is the 2115 doesn't have a day complication, it only has a date complication as per the Joro. So really this is the correct choice, because there's a limited number of quartz calibers at this price point that are suitable, that provide a day-date complication. So I think the PC33A is the correct choice. The VH31, for example, is a better quality movement. And of course it does have the 4 Hz or 4 ticks per second sweep, which is smoother rather than 1 tick per second. But problem with the VH31, as I've detailed, it doesn't have a day-date complication. It's a no-date movement. So that's not an option unless they made this a no-date version. Subjectively, one could argue, well, it would be a better piece if Timex deleted the day-date complication and simply made it a no-date Q Timex and used the VH31. I would prefer that because of the 4 ticks per second smoother sweep of the second hand, and of course the VH31 is a higher quality movement and one doesn't have this problem of the second hand jumping out of position. But then purist Q Timex collectors that appreciate the original 1979 aesthetic would say, well, that's had a day-date complication, this is a heritage reissue, it has to have it. Really comes down to your taste. I like the symmetry of a dial without a date complication. Some collectors prefer the convenience of a day-date complication. It is useful to see the days of the week plus the month. Sorry, days of the week plus date. So, works good sometimes. Now, excellent movement in terms of reliability. No reliability issues reported. Accuracy is stellar at plus or minus 30. 3-year battery life is excellent. So correct choice of movement. So last I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So low tier piece. Low tier is €0 to €500. €96 in the low tier. Yes, I'm going to declare this excellent quality and I'm going to declare the value as okay. I'm not going to say excellent quality and excellent value because of the shortcoming with regards to the C3 Superluminova on the dial. It's 3 to 4 layers, it needs to be 5 to 6. However, everything else about the watch is good. Quality control, build quality, materials and finishing are excellent. One has to appreciate the heritage. It was released in 2019 to celebrate the 40th anniversary, and one has to appreciate this is a heritage reissue of an iconic piece, the Q Timex from 1979. Timex does have brand heritage, that adds value to the piece, and even though it only has a 12-month international warranty versus 2 years, this does represent an excellent value proposition at only €96. But it does face stiff competition, so excellent quality, value is okay, and I'm going to recommend it to you for consideration. I hope you enjoyed my review of the Q Timex Reissue. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.